Smoke curled up into the star-swept sky like black fingers trying to claw down the heavens. The cantina blazed in the heart of the empty town, its flames licking up the timber frame with a roar that drowned out the gunfire. Clara Whitmore couldn't feel her hands. They were raw from scraping against splintered wood, her skirts torn and scorched, blood mingled with ash. The world burned red and orange around her as she pressed herself low beneath the cracked bar counter. Her breath came in sharp, panicked huffs, smoke scraping her throat with every inhale. Somewhere outside, a horse whinnied and a man screamed. She had to move. If she stayed still, she'd either choke to death or be dragged out and shot like the others. The last thing she remembered before the fire had swallowed the cantina whole was the poker game gone sour. Kane Ledger's boys had stormed in, pistols drawn, looking for her father, or more specifically, the money he'd stolen from them years back and never lived long enough to spend. Her father was already dead. That secret had died with him 3 weeks ago when his heart finally gave out behind the bar. Kane's men didn't know, and Clara hadn't corrected them when they burst in shouting for the old bastard and his brat daughter. They shot 2 patrons on sight, then tossed a lantern at the liquor wall. The fire had answered faster than any sheriff ever would. Clara staggered to her feet. Her left shoe was gone. Blisters popped along her heel as she stumbled past the corpses on the floor, one hand braced along the burning wall, the other covering her mouth. The door, 20 feet away, might as well have been on another planet. Then something cracked loud behind her. Not a gun. A beam. The ceiling was coming down. She ran. She didn't make it to the front. The beam collapsed where she'd been a heartbeat ago. Splinters sliced her arm. Clara screamed, but no one outside heard. They were too busy whooping and jeering. She turned toward the back door instead, weaving through tables, broken chairs, and shattered bottles. Smoke clawed her eyes. Heat blistered her scalp. But she made it. Her fingers found the iron latch. She threw the door open. The cold desert night slapped her face. For 1 second she tasted salvation. Then a shadow moved behind the outhouse. Kane's man stepped into view, rifle raised. A smirk played across his face. "Well now," he said, cocking the weapon, "if it ain't the little barmaid cockroach. Thought you'd fry like the rest." Clara froze, hands raised. The man grinned and pulled the trigger. The shot never landed. Another figure moved faster than thought, darting from the darkness, striking like a coiled snake. A tomahawk thudded into the outlaw's chest. The man crumpled sideways, gurgling, gun clattering into the dirt. Clara's heart nearly gave out. A tall man stepped into the firelight. Painted with ash and shadows, he wore a long leather coat over a deerskin shirt, his black hair tied behind his neck with rawhide. He pulled the tomahawk free without flinching. She backed up. He spoke low, firm. "You burn if you wait." Clara's lips trembled. "Who?" He didn't answer. Just grabbed her arm. Gunshots rang out behind them. The cantina exploded in a wave of heat and sparks as a full keg of moonshine went up. Clara was thrown forward, the stranger's body covering hers. They didn't wait to recover. He yanked her to her feet, and together they sprinted into the night. They didn't stop running for miles. By the time Clara could breathe again, her lungs felt like paper. The burning light of the town was far behind them now, replaced by the cold hush of desert rocks and sagebrush. The man led her to a shallow gulch, where a horse waited, tethered beneath a low ledge. Clara nearly collapsed. "You're not one of Kane's," she said at last. "No." "Then who are you?" He hesitated. Then, "Taji." She blinked at him through dust-rimmed lashes. "Why help me?" "I saw you," he said, not looking at her. "I saw you through the fire." Clara swallowed. There was no time to ask more. Behind them, down the slope, the echoes of galloping hooves bounced through the canyon. Taji threw her up onto the horse like she weighed nothing and leapt up behind her. He didn't ask if she could ride. She barely had the strength to argue. They rode hard through the canyon until the world became a blur of stone and wind. Hours passed. The sun had begun to crawl over the eastern rim of the desert when Clara woke, slumped forward in the saddle, her skin numb, her eyes dry. They had stopped at last beneath the shadow of a crumbling cliff. Taji had built a small fire. He offered her a tin of water and a strip of dried meat. She took both without speaking. The silence stretched. "I've never killed a man," she said softly. Taji nodded. "Good. I might have tonight. If I had a gun." "You didn't. That matters too." He offered her a second strip of meat. She shook her head. He leaned back against the rock, one knee up, one hand resting casually on his knife. He looked like stone himself, quiet, weathered, unmoved. Clara stared at the fire. "Why'd they burn it down? Why now?" "Cain Ledger rides with ghosts. He wants something. My father's dead. He died broke." Taji's eyes met hers then. "You sure?" Clara flinched. She wasn't sure of anything anymore. Later that morning, they reached the outer wall of the old convent. It rose like a mirage from the desert, a mission-style compound with white stucco walls, sun-bleached and cracked, flanked by crooked crosses and fields of wind-twisted brush. Bells hung silent in the tower. It looked abandoned, yet from the courtyard came the faint sound of humming voices, low, Spanish, rhythmic. The gate creaked open. A woman in gray robes and a sun-worn face met them with a rifle slung across her shoulder. Taji spoke first, in soft Spanish. Clara didn't catch it all. Only, her father's enemies, and needs sanctuary. The woman looked Clara over. "She's burned." "I'm fine," Clara said hoarsely. "You're not," the nun replied, but she opened the gate wider. Inside, the courtyard was shaded with jacaranda trees and cloaked in desert silence. Clara was taken to a side room, where two younger sisters cleaned her wounds. Taji's shoulder was bandaged without complaint. As twilight painted the convent gold and purple, Clara sat on a bench overlooking the barren yard. Taji stood nearby, watching the desert. "You can go now," she said, voice brittle. He didn't turn. "You're not safe." "No one's safe," she muttered. He said nothing more. A few hours later, a nun came into her room. "Child," she said in a hushed voice, "a man came to the edge of the wall. Said he was looking for his cousin's daughter. But he had no name." Clara's stomach twisted. "Did you tell him anything?" "We sent him away," the nun said. But he stared a long time. As if he knew someone was watching. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her cot, listening to the desert breathe. Her fingers played absently over the small scar above her wrist, a burn from when she was 10 and spilled stew on herself. Her father had smacked her for the mess. But later, when he thought she was asleep, he sat beside her bed and whispered he was sorry. It was the only time he'd ever said it. She wondered now what secrets he'd kept, what deals he'd made with devils like Cain Ledger, and what they thought she still had. The night grew colder. In the courtyard, wind stirred the branches. Clara rose, restless. She padded out in bare feet, the stone cool under her toes, her shawl clutched tight around her. She wasn't sure what she expected to find. But she wasn't expecting the body. It lay crumpled near the chapel wall, half in shadow. One of the sisters screamed behind her. Clara ran forward. The man's throat had been slit clean. Pinned to his chest with a knife was a scrap of cloth. A message burned into it. "The girl is marked. Return her, or burn with her." Clara backed away slowly, her hands trembling. Taji appeared silently beside her. He crouched, pulled the cloth free, and sniffed it. "Snake oil and blood," he murmured. "Cain." Clara felt her knees begin to buckle. Taji caught her before she hit the ground. He looked her in the eyes, his voice grave. "This is not over." Clara's lips parted, but no sound came. Somewhere beyond the convent wall, a coyote howled into the night. And in that haunting sound, Clara felt it, not just fear, but a promise. They were coming, and she would have to be ready. The chapel bell rang once at sunrise. Not for prayer, not for mass, but to bury the dead. They wrapped the stranger's body in rough cotton and lowered him beneath the old fig tree in silence. The sisters whispered rosaries, their faces drawn and pale in the cold dawn light. Clara watched from the far edge of the garden, arms crossed tight across her chest. She hadn't slept. The night's message replayed in her head, over and over, return her or burn with her. She barely knew who she even was anymore. A bartender's daughter? A survivor? A target? Sister Magdalena placed a hand gently on Clara's shoulder. There will be more, Clara said quietly. Yes, Magdalena replied. But we are not made of clay and fear. The Lord did not shape us to run. Clara looked into the nun's weathered face. There was steel behind those eyes. Later that morning, Clara found Taji near the horse stalls, checking the bandage on his shoulder. He didn't flinch, didn't even look at her. You should leave, she said after a long silence. They're after me. Not you. I've seen what Cain's men do. To villages. To women. I leave, they come. I can handle it, Clara insisted. Taji finally turned. No, he said softly. Not yet. The words stung. Not because they were cruel, but because they were true. Clara lowered her gaze. Taji sighed and turned back to the saddle. Your father took something. That's why they hunt you. My father died broke in a saloon. No, he said. He died quiet. Which is what thieves do when they think the storm passed. She stepped closer. You know more than you're saying. I know Cain Ledger, Taji said. He led a group of vigilantes after the war. Hunted my people for sport. Called it justice. Clara's throat tightened. My father never, he wouldn't. Taji didn't answer. And that silence said enough. By mid-afternoon, the convent had transformed. The sisters moved with urgency. Doors were barricaded. Oil lamps filled. Rifles that hadn't been touched in years were cleaned and checked. The convent was no longer a sanctuary. It was a fortress in waiting. Clara found herself helping. She helped reinforce the chapel doors, fetch buckets from the well, even practiced reloading a rifle under Sister Magdalena's sharp eye. I thought nuns were peaceful, Clara muttered. Magdalena didn't smile. We are. But peace is not submission. It is courage without blood, until blood is the only language left. As the sun dipped behind the mesa, Taji returned with a burlap sack and a rusted tin box. He tossed them on the chapel bench in front of Clara. She stared. What's this? Proof, he said. I found it buried behind your father's bar, under the smoke pit. Clara's hands shook as she opened the tin. Inside were bundles of Confederate bonds, worth thousands before the war ended, and a map marked with red circles leading to hidden caches. And at the bottom, a letter, written in her father's hand. To my daughter Clara, if you're reading this, then I've finally lost the last hand. I never meant to drag you into this. Cain and I, we weren't always enemies. We rode together once. Then came the gold, the blood, the betrayal. I took what I could and ran. This world don't forgive cowards, Clara. Don't become one. She read it twice before she spoke. He was planning to run again. Even in death. Taji nodded. But you're not him. Clara stared at the map. Cain wants this gold. No. Cain wants a legacy. And you're the only part left. A sudden noise snapped both their heads around. The chapel door creaked open. One of the younger nuns stumbled inside, breathless. They've been spotted. South Ridge. 12 riders. Clara's mouth went dry. Sister Magdalena's voice echoed behind them. Get everyone inside. We hold fast. An hour later, the convent was sealed. Every lantern doused. Every rifle loaded. The sisters moved like a militia, quiet and precise. Taji paced the outer wall, scanning the horizon. Clara stood beside him, rifle clutched to her chest, knuckles white. You ever shoot before? He asked. I watched my father do it, she muttered. He handed her a shell. Now's your lesson. The desert was silent. Too silent. Then, from the dark, laughter. Men laughing. Slowly. Like wolves circling the edge of a campfire. One voice rose above the rest. "Evenin', sisters. Lovely night for confession. Kane Ledger." His voice was slow molasses poured over poison. Clara's hands trembled. Taji's jaw tightened. "Don't shoot. Not yet." Kane stepped into the moonlight. He looked older than she expected. 40, maybe 50. Still tall, still mean. But time had scarred him. One eye clouded white. A jagged scar along his jaw. He wore a black duster and a wide-brimmed hat that cast his face in shadow. He held up a white handkerchief. "I ain't here to start trouble," he drawled. "I just want the girl. You give her over, we ride away." No bullets. No fire. No one answered. Kane clicked his tongue. "I know she's here. Clara Whitmore. Pretty little firebird. Your daddy owed me. Left me with ash and corpses. I aimed to balance the scales." Clara stepped up onto the wall. Taji reached for her, but she shook her head. She had to face him. "I'm here," she said. Kane looked up, surprised and pleased. "Well now. That's mighty bold." "You won't get what you're after," she said. "There's nothing left." "Oh, I think there is," he replied. You're what's left." A pause. Then Kane said, "You look like him, you know. Same mouth. Same eyes. I should have shot you with him. Shame I missed that chance." "I'm not him," she said. "I don't run." Kane smiled slowly. "Well, let's see if you shoot." He turned and in one sudden move raised his rifle. Gunfire exploded. The courtyard erupted in chaos. Bullets slammed into adobe. Lamps shattered. Screams rang out. Clara ducked, fired blindly toward the ridge. Taji leapt down into the shadows, vanishing like smoke. Kane's men rushed the walls, ropes and ladders in hand. 2 made it up the east side, until Sister Magdalena met them with buckshot to the chest. Another made it through the front gate, only to fall to Taji's blade in the shadows. Clara ran along the parapet, her lungs burning, her ears ringing. She saw Kane below, directing his men with eerie calm. He never flinched. He wasn't afraid. And that terrified her more than anything. Then someone screamed from the garden. Clara turned. One of the sisters, Maria, was dragged from the shadows by a masked outlaw. He held a knife to her throat, shouting for Clara to come out or watch the nun die. Clara froze. Her hands gripped the rifle. If she stepped out, she'd die. If she stayed back, Maria would. Her breath caught. Then Taji appeared behind the outlaw like a ghost and slit his throat clean. Maria collapsed, sobbing. Clara dropped to her knees, overwhelmed. Taji crouched beside her. "It's not over," he whispered. "He's retreating. For now." Sure enough, Kane's whistle rang through the night. His men pulled back like shadows on retreating tide. Clara looked out into the moonlight. Kane stood just beyond rifle range. He tipped his hat to her, like a gentleman at a ball. Then he disappeared into the dark. The convent held. But Clara knew, it was only round one. That night, Clara sat in the chapel beside the ruined altar. Her dress was torn, her cheek bruised, her hands caked in soot and blood. She stared at the gold cross overhead, its shadow long and solemn. Taji entered, quiet as always. She didn't look at him. "I should run," she said. "You still think that's who you are?" "I don't know who I am." He sat beside her. "You're not your father." "I might be," she whispered. Taji didn't speak for a while. Then he said, "My sister died because I believed a man's word. I thought honor was enough. It wasn't." She turned to him. "What did you do?" "I stopped believing in words. Started using steel." Clara looked down at her hands. "I don't want to become like that." "Then don't," he said. "But don't let Kane write your story either." She looked up at him, tears brimming. "I'm scared." "I know." Taji stood and held out his hand. "We ride at first light. He'll come back. We bring the fight to him." Clara stared at his hand. Then took it. Dawn broke blood-red across the desert. Clara stood in a borrowed duster, rifle slung across her back, saddlebag filled with the map and her father's letter. Taji adjusted the cinch on the horse. You ride fast. No, she said. But I'll learn. They mounted and turned south, toward the ridge Cain had come from. Sister Magdalena approached before they left. She pressed something into Clara's hand. A simple silver cross. Not all battles are won with guns, child. Clara nodded, slipping it into her pocket. Then they rode. Into the sun. Into Cain's shadow. And into the story Clara would have to write for herself, or die trying. The wind tasted like dust and memory. By mid-morning, the trail had turned narrow, winding between jagged rocks and dry ravines. The sky above stretched endless and blue, but Clara rode with her eyes fixed ahead, heart clenched around a growing flame. She barely felt the saddle under her anymore, only the weight of her father's betrayal, the weight of the letter pressed inside her shirt, and the cold iron of the rifle slung across her back. Taji rode ahead, silent but alert, his eyes constantly scanning the distance. Every movement, every twitch of his reins, was purposeful. He rode like a man who had tracked death before and knew what it smelled like. They didn't speak for hours. The silence suited Clara. Words didn't fix what fire had already taken. They camped that night in a crevice near a dead riverbed. Clara crouched over a small flame, fingers busy cleaning the barrel of her rifle the way Taji had shown her. Her hands no longer trembled. Her blisters were callous. She didn't flinch when a coyote howled in the distance. Taji handed her a tin of beans. Eat. She took it. Why here? Cain's men passed this way. Recent tracks. She hesitated. So we're not just following him? No, Taji stirred the fire with a stick. We're hunting him. Clara stared at the sparks. What will you do when we find him? Kill him. The answer came without hesitation. Clara looked down. And if I get there first? Taji's eyes flicked toward her. Then you better mean it. They didn't sleep much. In the early hours before dawn, Taji woke her with a quiet nudge. Get up. Clara blinked the sleep from her eyes. What is it? He pointed up the ridge. Torchlight. 3 riders. They waited in silence, cloaked by darkness. The men didn't stop. They rode straight past their hidden perch, unaware of the watchers above. Once they vanished into the distance, Taji mounted again. We're close. Clara adjusted her hat. Then let's finish this. By midday, they reached the outskirts of a long-forgotten mining camp. Rotting shacks and rusted rails clung to the hillsides like the bones of a dead animal. A half-collapsed water tower leaned against the wind. Somewhere, a metal sheet clanged in the breeze. Clara's stomach twisted. There, Taji murmured, pointing toward a squat stone building dug into the slope. A lookout stood nearby, rifle in hand, lazily watching the desert. Taji dismounted, pulled his knife. I want him alive, Clara whispered. Taji glanced back, one eyebrow raised. She shrugged. We need answers. They crept low. Taji moved ahead like shadow incarnate. Clara followed, heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The lookout never heard them. Taji had him pinned and gagged before his gun could rise. Clara pressed the barrel of her rifle to the man's gut. His eyes bulged in panic. Where's Cain? She hissed. The man shook his head. Taji tightened the grip on his windpipe. Clara lowered the rifle. She pulled the knife from her boot. The man whimpered. Start talking, she said. Or I start cutting. That did it. Camp inside the mine shaft. He's got men posted. 24, maybe more. And Cain. Every day. He don't leave. What's he looking for? She asked. The man hesitated. Then, gold. Deed. Your name's on it. Says it's his now. Clara felt something in her shift. The man looked up, sweat streaking his temple. Please. I ain't loyal. I just follow the loudest voice. She stood. Then hear mine. Run. Never come back. The man didn't need convincing. He bolted. Taji watched him disappear into the desert. You went soft, he said. I went strategic, Clara replied. Hill spread panic. That's just as useful. They waited until nightfall. Then they struck. The camp was poorly guarded. Cain had grown lazy in his arrogance. Clara and Taji slipped through the broken fences, avoiding the firelight. She didn't breathe until they were just yards from the mine shaft entrance. The mouth of it yawned open like a wound in the earth, lit by lanterns and guarded by two men half asleep. Taji took one with a silent blade. Clara raised her rifle on the other and fired. The crack echoed through the canyon. Inside the mine, shouting erupted. Taji ducked behind a crate and dragged her with him. "That was bold," he hissed. "Consider it a knock on the door." Cain's men spilled from the tunnel, weapons raised, confused, shouting. Taji dropped 3 before they hit the dirt. Clara kept low, heart hammering, shooting only when she had a clean line. Blood soaked the gravel. One man tried to circle them. Taji shot him through the thigh and left him screaming. And then Cain stepped out of the mine. He wore no gun, no armor, just that same black coat and the calm of a man who believed in his own invincibility. "Clara," he drawled, "look at you. Daddy would be so proud." She stepped out from behind the crate, gun trained on his heart. "You're going to die tonight, Cain." He raised his hands slowly. "Not before I say my piece." Taji flanked him from the left. "Be quick." Cain looked at them both, then laughed. "You two think this ends with me?" Clara's hands tightened. "I know about the bonds," she said. "The gold. The land. You think that's what I want," he spat. "No, girl. I want you. You're the last Whitmore. And Whitmore stole what should have built an empire. My father ran from you." Cain's face twisted. "He ran with my plans. He was supposed to be my partner. He took everything. And he raised you in that filth like a slap to my name." Clara's gun wavered. Cain took a step forward. "You think if you shoot me this ends? No. The people I ride with, they'll keep coming. You're not a symbol of justice. You're a flag planted in blood. They'll bury you just like they buried me." Clara looked to Taji, then back at Cain, and fired. The shot hit Cain's shoulder. He spun, dropped to his knees, howling. Clara stalked forward, reloaded. Cain looked up, teeth bared. "Do it then. End it." Clara lowered the rifle. "No." Cain blinked. "I'm not giving you a martyr's death." She turned to Taji. "We burn it. All of it. The mine. The map. The lies. No legacy. No gold. Just ashes." Taji nodded. It took them an hour to pile the crates of dynamite left by the old mining crews. Another 10 minutes to rig the fuses. They dragged Cain, still groaning, to the edge of the ridge and tied him to a pole. "You'll regret this," he spat. Clara leaned close. "I already have." She lit the fuse. The explosion tore through the desert like thunder from God. The mine collapsed inward, fire and rock and legacy buried together in the earth. Cain screamed as dust filled the sky. And then there was only silence. Taji and Clara stood side by side, watching the flames. Clara breathed deep. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like relief. They left before sunrise, riding north through the scorched valley. By the second night, they reached a ridge overlooking the convent. It stood, scarred but whole. Smoke curled gently from its chimneys. Life had returned. Clara dismounted and stared at the place that had once sheltered her. "I don't know where I go from here," she said softly. Taji adjusted his reins. "Forward," he said. She smiled faintly. "What about you?" "I go where I'm needed." Clara looked at him, searching his face. "You're not going to stay?" "I was never meant to stay," he said. "I walk shadows. You walk light now." He offered her a nod, a warrior's farewell. Then turned his horse east. She watched until he vanished over the hill. Then Clara turned back toward the convent. Her story wasn't over. But it was finally hers to write. The rain came 2 days after she returned. The first in months. It rolled in quietly, soft thunder brushing the hills, dark clouds low over the desert. The convent's adobe walls glistened with mist. The sisters stood outside in the courtyard, palms outstretched, letting the drops touch their skin like blessings. Clara stood beneath the chapel archway, coat damp, rifle slung loose over her shoulder. She wasn't sure how to feel. There was no fanfare, no banners in the wind. Just quiet, stillness, and the first water since the fire. Storms wash away more than dust, Sister Magdalena said beside her. Clara looked at the older woman. They also remind you what still hurts. Magdalena nodded slowly. Healing always starts in the ache. The convent had changed since she left. Fewer sisters remained now. Some had gone to other missions, some to families in distant towns. And some, those who bled to protect her, now lay buried beneath the jacaranda trees, with stones marked in humble script. Clara visited each one that morning. She knelt in the rain. Let the silence wrap around her like mourning cloth. Taji was gone. Left without a word, as she knew he would. He was a fire that didn't linger, just scorched the right path when needed. She missed him more than she admitted. Inside the chapel, the crucifix still hung askew, blackened on one side from the shootout. The pews bore bullet holes and scorch marks. But there was peace in the damage. Proof of survival. That something had stood here when evil came knocking, and did not fall. By midday, a rider approached the convent gates. Dusty, worn. A telegram pouch at his hip. Clara met him at the entrance. "Miss Whitmore," he asked, tipping his hat. "Message for you." Came through from Santa Fe. Marked urgent. She nodded and took it with careful fingers. He waited, eyes shifting between her rifle and her scars. "Heard about what happened out here. You all right, ma'am?" Clara studied him. Young. Honest eyes. Nervous. "I'm fine," she said. "But thank you for asking." He nodded and rode off. Inside her room, she unfolded the telegram. To Clara Whitmore, care of Mission Santa Estrella. From Marshal Noah Tolliver, U.S. Law Office, Santa Fe. Message. Reports confirm Kane Ledger's death. Survivors of his gang are being rounded up across counties. Witnesses say a woman burned his mine to the ground. Word travels fast. Not all men are pleased. You may want to leave town before they come looking. Also, your name was on a land claim filed by your father in Silverthorne Valley. 68 acres. Fertile soil. Unclaimed. Yours if you want it. Clara read it twice. Then a third time. She folded it slowly and stared out the rain-washed window. A chance. A future. The next day, she saddled up a horse. She didn't take much. Just a satchel, her rifle, a flask of clean water, and the silver cross Magdalena had given her. The other sisters stood at the gate, watching with quiet warmth. "Will you be back?" one asked. Clara looked at the road. Then over her shoulder. "Maybe," she said. "But I think I have to build something first. Something that's mine." She turned the horse west. Rode with the wind behind her and the desert stretching wide. Silverthorne Valley took 2 days to reach. Nestled between two great ridges and ringed by cedar and pine, it looked like a scar healed over, green amid dry earth. The land her father had once claimed, likely with the money he stole. It didn't feel like an inheritance. It felt like a responsibility. The cabin was long gone. But the bones of a well remained. Old fencing posts jutted from the soil like crooked teeth. A stream snaked through the middle, low but alive. Clara stepped off the horse and crouched to touch the earth. She smiled. It was good soil. That night, she built a fire. Pitched a canvas. Sat with her back to the flames and watched the stars appear one by one like old friends coming home. She wrote by lantern light. Not for anyone else, just for her. Words about her father. About the cantina. About Taji and the sisters. About guilt, love, grief, and the woman she was finally becoming. She didn't know if she'd ever send the letter. But it felt right to write it. "I was ash once," she wrote. "Now I'm the flame." Weeks passed. She worked the land. Tilled the soil. Fixed the well. Traded with passing riders for lumber and seeds. Built a fence by hand and slept with her rifle beside her bedroll. Some nights she'd wake thinking she heard horses, Kane's ghost maybe, but they never came. The law had done its job. For once. and when autumn colored the hills in gold and red, Clara had a small cabin frame standing proud on her land. Rough, uneven, but hers. One evening, as the sun sank behind the western ridge, a rider appeared on the horizon. For a moment Clara's breath caught. The figure drew closer. Long black coat, deerskin shirt, horse that moved like wind. Taji. He dismounted without a word. Clara crossed her arms, but couldn't hide the smile. Didn't think you were the visiting type. He held out a small satchel. Seeds, he said. Corn. Beans. Good for hard earth. She took it, fingers brushing his. Silence stretched. You came a long way for crops, she said softly. I came for the woman who walks the light. Clara looked down. I missed you. I know. He turned to the cabin. You built this. Most of it. It leans a little. Taji smirked. Strong things often do. They sat by the fire that night, side by side, no words needed. The next morning, they finished the roof together. And by the time the first frost kissed the valley grass, there was a porch swing, a stacked woodpile, and laughter where once there had been only silence. Clara still bore her scars. But now they told a different story. Not of loss, but of survival. Of choosing to stay when running would have been easier. Of lighting a match in a dark world and refusing to let it die.